Okay, so I picked up a Delta pedestal grinder, sort of the classic style that they made for so long. And this one's all in parts. The previous owner had just a box full of parts and he never really put it together and wanted to get rid of it. So I picked it up, taking everything apart. I was hoping that the motor would just fire up, but listen to what we got here. So it hums a little bit, doesn't get up to speed, so I'm hoping that it's the capacitor. We'll see when everything all checks out, but it should be a fun project, something different. And most everything is here. Just looks like some pretty basic fasteners and bolts and things that I'll need to get, so should be fun.
Since the motor isn't working, it starts with motor disassembly to see what's wrong. So I'm starting by marking the end bell orientation in relation to the center section of the motor, and I'm removing the threaded rods here one by one. And as I was going along, I realized I should mark the orientation of the end bells in relation to the center with a punch here. Because I'm going to repaint the motor, my marker marks would disappear when I paint. So I just marked it with a punch so that's a little indentation to line up properly. And now I'm carefully removing the end bells. In this case, my taps were light enough. I was comfortable using a screwdriver to do so. Sometimes I'll use a block of wood or a chunk of wood or a dowel or something, so I'm not using metal on metal. So the end bells came off pretty easily. I'm checking the bearings here, and we'll see what we got.
The end bells off this Delta grinder motor, and everything came off fine. I marked ahead of time where everything lines up, and got these off without really much of a problem. Bearings seem to be okay. We might replace those, a little bit of flex in there. Main thing I was looking to see was if this motor is fried or not. Based off the color, it seems to be pretty good. It does have a little bit of a smell, but I'm hoping it's okay. And then on this side is where the centrifugal switch is, so I don't want to yank that off without taking a closer look, but I did check the switch itself. This does throw open when it seems like it would anyway. Everything moves like it should to open when the motor spins, and everything seems to be hooked up, and again seems to be pretty clean. So I think my issue is the capacitor, I'm hoping. So I'll get a new capacitor and put it in and see if that takes care of this. Okay, so the capacitor came in, and I was hoping this was what was wrong with the motor. The motor just hummed, and so I installed the capacitor in here and sort of wrapped it in cardboard to jam it in there so it doesn't rattle around, and the motor fired up just fine. So happy to see that, that was the issue. And so now I've detached all the wiring, and I'm taping off the motor and sort of cleaning it up before I get to painting here. So that'll be the next step. Okay, so I rewired all of this in here, and behind this cardboard piece is the new capacitor. I just rewired it the way it was, and then I put a new cord in, nice long one, so I don't have to move the grinder around when it's all back on the pedestal. And then I also started to work on these light wiring pieces as well. Got those all connected to the hot wires coming from the wall. And so we'll just do a little test here to make sure it's running. Okay, motor is working. So we can put it all back together.
And so now I'm just covering up all the wiring with the metal plate that was provided. And it's just 2 screws, goes right on. I just cleaned it up with some sandpaper and random orbit and removed all the rust. And then I'm going to turn on the motor and clean the shafts using a wire brush and sandpaper. And so that's just a technique to save a little arm labor, elbow grease, and just let the motor do the work. But then I put everything back together, even the grinding wheels on and the everything. And the motor just whined terribly. I guess the extra weight of the grinding wheels and everything, the bearings just were screaming, couldn't handle it. And so, lesson learned, I should have replaced the bearings to start with. I didn't want to get into that one side of the motor where the centrifugal switch is, because that's always sort of a risky proposition, especially with old motors. So I got the bearings off on the one side, and then took my attention to the side with the centrifugal switch, and basically had to just detach the whole thing. and do some soldering afterwards and reconnection to the windings. So lesson learned, but in the end I'll end up with a better machine.
Okay, well, I had to take apart the motor again. I was getting a really loud sort of whining or squeaking sound. The motor runs fine, but I just wasn't happy with when it was spinning down. It would really squeak a lot. So I took everything apart and I put new bearings in, and it's a bear to work with. On the inside of the side that has the centrifugal switch, the bearing is captured by these two screws, and then there is, of course, the centrifugal switch here, and here's the other side with the bearing, and then the switch I actually had to fully take off. This will go here, and then there's two wires that'll connect to the windings. And I had to actually, these were shrink wrapped with some heat wrap, and so I took them apart so I could get that fully out. That's just one of the things when you take apart a motor. It's just so sort of frustrating sometimes how they're very hard to work with, because everything's connected together in a way that makes it very hard to get apart. So, and I had to do a little bit of resoldering here as well. I had a little bit of solder here, and just a little solder gun. So hoping when I put it all back together it'll run without that squeaking.
So now I'm putting the end bells back on. This is the side with the centrifugal switch, and now I'm trying to wire the centrifugal switch to the motor windings. And so I'm twisting the windings to the wires off the centrifugal switch, and then I'm going to put a little solder on those, and then I'm going to heat wrap those as well. So I've got a piece of heat wrap on one end of the wire already, and I'm trying to twist them together, and now I'm putting a little solder on there to create a good connection. And then I'll move the heat wrap over it and use a little heat gun to shrink the wrap, and that'll be the motor getting reassembled, and hopefully as good as new or better than new. In the next video we'll take it from there, reassemble everything, and do some final parting shots as we'll take it from this pile of parts to the finished product. So stay tuned for part 2 as we take it to the home stretch. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope the video has been helpful for you. Feel free to subscribe using the subscribe link. And if you've benefited from the channel and enjoy what you see here, consider donating using the PayPal link that's on my banner picture on my YouTube channel homepage. I put out a video per week. Hope they're helpful. Anything else I can do, contact me. Thanks a lot.